And today we're going to continue with Title IV, promoting the general welfare. Welfare, of course, has a specific meaning: health, happiness, prosperity. And how do we promote prosperity? By ensuring there's money circulating in the economy. So today's sections deal with Subtitle C, American Union Banking, starting with Section 431, the findings and purpose. And the findings and purpose, I want to talk a little bit about kind of give an overview of what's in the subtitle. Make some big improvements to the monetary system. They're timely and they're necessary, and they address an awful lot of problems. And then in later sections, I'll get into more of the technical details. But let me start with reading the findings into the record. Congress finds the following. 1. After the Revolutionary War, the first Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton, established the first bank of the United States. By consolidating debt and expanding the money supply, Hamilton was able to grow the economy by influencing the circulation of money through bank branches up and down the East Coast. However, since sending letters was the fastest form of communication available to him, he was limited in how well he could manage the economy. 2. 4 generations later, during the Civil War, the U.S. Treasury introduced greenbacks as legal tender. This sovereign money was issued directly under Congress's constitutional authority and created the first national currency. Abraham Lincoln also signed the National Banking Acts, regulating the banking system as well as could be done, when the telegraph was the fastest form of communication. 3. 4 generations later, during the Great Depression, Franklin Roosevelt decoupled the money supply from the gold standard and addressed wealth inequality through government spending. He also signed the Banking Act of 1933, increasing oversight of the banking system now that the telephone was the fastest form of communication. 4. In the 21st century, modern technology allows for instantaneous communication around the globe, enabling real-time payment processing. Accordingly, economist Robert Hockett has proposed the Treasury Dollar Act of 2020, upgrading the national banking system again to create a public payment infrastructure equally and efficiently accessible to all. 5. As previous cycles have demonstrated, it's necessary to increase the money supply in the long run to maintain stable prices and maximize growth. This dividend is the result of the evolution of the U.S. economy, and Congress finds that the system-wide profit from the economy should be distributed among the owners, the citizens of the United States. Accordingly, the money supply should be expanded to include a digital legal tender known as Treasury Dollar Bills issued by the U.S. Treasury. 6. The Treasury already possesses the framework of a public payment infrastructure through their Treasury Direct accounts, which allow account holders to conduct transactions at any time of the day or night and can be expanded to accommodate wider use by the American people. The purpose of this subtitle is to promote economic prosperity in the United States while establishing the U.S. as a worldwide leader in digital currency. So digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, things like that are in the news. President Biden recently signed an executive order to look into these sorts of things. Clearly, they are the future. At some point, we will have a digital currency. And so the question is really, what form should it take? For that, we also need to look at what is money? What should money be? Money is a medium of exchange. That is its primary purpose. Its primary purpose is not to store value. That's a feature of assets. Money is the thing that we need to circulate. The economy works. Unfortunately, as productivity has grown over the last 40 years, we've ended up with a structural gap in the economy. There's a gap between the goods and the services that the economy produces and the wages that are paid out. In his book, Basic Economy and Sovereign Money, Geoff Crocker lays out the basic argument and explains that productivity means that the wage component of output goes down, and when earned income becomes insufficient to purchase the productive output, the gap has to be made up somewhere. And the way that it's being made up is in the form of pensions, welfare benefits, dividends, and consumer credit. This pushes government spending into deficit, which can never be repaid. And the solution is a sovereign debt-free money, similar to the greenbacks that Abraham Lincoln so many years ago. And we've seen how much the debt and the deficit have increased over the last 40 years. When people's wages aren't sufficient to buy the things that are in the economy, where do they get the money? And so we've seen increasing numbers of people on disability, getting unemployment benefits, other benefits, ways that Congress can money out into the economy so that people have the money they need to spend. The problem with creating all of this money as credit and through debt and paying interest on it is that it's destabilizing. It builds up and then it comes crashing back down. And these are the crashes that we get every once in a while. And again, the tool to prevent this is through sovereign money. It's normal for the money supply to grow. It doesn't have to be done, doesn't have to be borrowed to put more dollars in circulation. Money is like the lifeblood of our economy. Its proper circulation is essential to well-being. And so as the economy grows, the amount in circulation has to grow too. Think about the human body. There's no correct amount of blood for a human to have. At birth, a baby's got 10, 12 ounces of blood. By age 10, they've got 2 liters flowing through their veins. And adults got 1.5 gallons or more. You can use other metrics like body temperature to judge health across a diverse population. But when it comes to the amount of blood that should be circulating, it's very individual. It varies with time, and it should be flexible. The money supply is the same thing. So once we recognize that the money supply needs to grow, this is the profit of the economy. The next question is, how should it be distributed? And one possible answer is through government spending, but a better answer is to give every citizen an equal share as a universal basic income. When Andrew Yang was running for president, this is what he called the freedom dividend, because the growth in the money supply is the dividend that should go to the people who make up America. So this legislative package establishes the American Union's jobs program, which we're going to talk about at the next hearing, specifically as the distribution method for these new dollars. These two subsections, the Treasury Dollar Bills today and the American Union Jobs Program are very intertwined. I'll try and explain some of the relevant details as they come along, but most part we'll focus on Treasury Dollar Bills today. And I think, Mixed Chair, that concludes my testimony for Section 431, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes, I do have a question. Is this MMT?
I would not describe this as MMT. MMT is modern monetary theory. And it's correct in recognizing that government has a responsibility to increase the amount of money in circulation. The people who assert that we should balance the budget are wrong. This is the Ross-Perot fallacy. Back in the 90s, Ross Perot was the first person I ever voted for president. He was a billionaire, so it gave him credibility as a businessman, and he was running as an independent. And he used to do these primetime infomercials using charts and graphs to make some points about the economy. And he had a pretty populist message. He talked about how our per capita healthcare spending was the highest on the planet, but we were only 16th in life expectancy. Years later, we're down to 40th in life expectancy. He gave us charts on the high rate of child poverty. He showed how our military spending was all out of proportion with other countries. He showed a chart condemning the ratio of CEO salaries to their employees and pointed at it. He said, trickle-down economics didn't work. It stopped right here. But his main point was that our national debt was unacceptable and unsustainable because it was $4 trillion, which is pretty quaint these days. And he pointed out that 3/4 of it had been racked up under Ronald Reagan and George Bush. And if you go back and you watch his videos today, there's a point that he makes that jumps out as obviously incorrect. He said, $4 trillion, folks, and we got nothing to show for it. And so in hindsight, you want to ask, really? Like, how could America have borrowed $4 trillion and have nothing to show for it? Like, do we do a big bonfire behind the White House and roast marshmallows and hot dogs over smoldering bundles of $100 bills? Like, did the $4 trillion get stashed under the mattress in the Lincoln bedroom? I mean, of course, when we borrowed $4 trillion, of course, we'd gotten something in return. We'd spent that money into the economy. We got infrastructure, we got healthcare, we got employment for millions of people who then took their paychecks and spent them in other parts of the economy. And so this fallacy was easy to gloss over because Perot was very good at showing facts and figures And it sounded plausible, right? This is the way that family budgets work. Americans have to live within their means, spend less than they earn, not run up huge credit card debts. And so surely the government must have the same constraint. Ross Perot got the people's attention, and he seemed credible, but he was wrong. But his folksy populist message convinced millions and millions of people that we should balance the budget and that deficit spending was bad. And it just became a shared cultural assumption, as unquestionable as driving on the right side of the road. Nobody challenged it. Nobody questioned him. And the Ross Perot fallacy got baked into the financial dogma of Washington. Balance the budget, pay as you go. So after Bill Clinton beat him for the presidency, President Clinton worked with the Republicans to eliminate the deficit. I remember him taking great pride in drawing a big giant zero on a whiteboard in front of the TV cameras, demonstrating the government was only spending as much as it took in. But when you step back and look at the larger picture, it doesn't make sense. The last time the federal debt was at zero was in 1835 under President Andrew Jackson. And back then, the United States had less than 15 million people. Of course, we need more money in circulation today. And the federal government got it there through deficit spending. It's Congress's constitutional responsibility to manage the money supply. But what they're not obligated to do is to borrow that money. Abraham Lincoln demonstrated this during the Civil War when the U.S. Treasury issued greenbacks, legal tender backed by the United States. The national debt isn't supposed to be paid back. It stands at $30 trillion now, and we'd crush the economy if we tried to pay it off. And instead, we're paying hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars every year in interest for the privilege of keeping that $30 trillion in circulation. And that's money that should be better spent elsewhere. So under the blueprint for a better America, the U.S. Treasury will begin putting digital greenbacks into circulation, and over time, they'll replace and pay down that $30 trillion debt. And that'll be financially better for all of us. Section 432 is the definitions, and a lot of these are pretty self-explanatory. As we get through this, I would like to credit some of the sources for the language in this subtitle. Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, he proposed S 3571 at the start of the pandemic, the Banking for All Act. Rashida Tlaib of Minnesota proposed HR 1030, the Automatic Boost to Communities Act. And Senator Kirsten Gillibrand of New York proposed Senate S 2755 in 2018, the Postal Banking Act. And all those pieces of legislation, bits and pieces of them ended up in this subtitle. There's also provisions from the Treasury Dollar Bill Act of 2020, proposed by Robert Hockett, as well as ideas from Money from Nothing, a book by Robert Hockett and Aaron James, and Basic Income and Sovereign Money by Geoff Crocker. These definitions are pretty self-explanatory. There's some references to the American Union Jobs Program. I just want to touch on a couple of them. I'm trying to share my screen here. So basic definitions: adult includes emancipated minors, as well as anyone over 18. Digital dollars. Digital dollars means Treasury dollar bill balances consisting of digital ledger entries recorded as assets by the U.S. Treasury. And this is important that they are recorded as assets versus liabilities. President Biden, in his recent executive order related to cryptocurrencies and central bank digital currencies, he defines them as a form of digital money denominated in the national unit of account as a direct liability of the central bank. The sovereign money is denominated as assets. Digital treasury accounts, I'll talk more about the pass-through accounts in some later sections. And Treasury dollar bill is defined as a zero interest treasury bill with no expiration date, valued at precisely one Federal Reserve note. I think that pretty much concludes my testimony for section 432. We'll come back to a few of these definitions as we get to them later in the subtitle.